The Mac Observer's Mac Geek Gab episode 844 for Monday, November 16th, 2020.
Welcome to the Mac Observer's Mac Geek Gab, the show where you send in the questions, you send in the tips, you send in the cool stuff found. We answer the questions, we share the tips, we share the cool stuff found, we share some cool stuff found of our own. The goal being each and every time we get together, all of us, you, me, him, everybody, we all learn at least 5 new things. Sponsors for this episode include mintmobile.com/MGG, Nebia.com/MGG with code Nebia, and Linode.com/MGG, where you can get $100 in credit. So we're going to check all of this out. We'll have more details about each of those later in the episode. Of course, for now, here in Durham, New Hampshire, I'm Dave Hamilton.
And here in Fairfield, Connecticut, this is John F. Braun.
All right, John F. Braun. So lots of stuff this week, last week. Lots of stuff to talk about. Obviously, we spoke about the Apple Silicon machines, the M1 machines that came out or were announced Tuesday. We have the new phones. The Mini and Max phones have started arriving in people's hands, including ours. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Of course, we've got lots of questions. And Big Sur was released for everyone to have. So we will talk about that. In fact, let's do that. Let's start. And we might have something else too. I haven't gotten clearance for this other special thing. So there might be yet another special episode if we don't get to put it in this one. I'm promising you it will come. But for now, Matthew starts us off with a question about Big Sur. He said, I've noticed that several apps and blogs are recommending waiting to upgrade to Big Sur for several subsequent releases/months. What do you guys think about this? So, the general advice applies. If you are conservative or truly have like mission critical work that must be done, and especially if you don't have a backup Mac, then I think waiting to upgrade a major operating system at any year is good practice. That's just how it goes. Like I said last week, and I've said many times, this studio machine, I'm usually about 6 months behind. Lately, that has I think I would have been okay with Catalina if I had done it right on day one, but I had no reason to dive into that, right? But Catalina's runs fine on this. All the software that I have that I use for this show now has been updated with Big Sur compatibility, but I'm not in any rush. But every other machine I have already has Big Sur on it. Either had the beta on my laptop or the release on the iMac down in the office. So, and I've had no issues with those. So I think for normal use stuff, I'm finding Big Sur all good. I've been running the developer betas on my laptop for, let's say a month now, and it's been fine. One piece of advice I have is keep doing your software updates. So yes, the Mac App Store updates for sure. Also, I highly recommend either, and probably both of these things are good for a little while right now, but run MacUpdater, because MacUpdater will check every app that you have on your Mac and tell you what apps have updates, because there's lots and lots and lots of them coming right now, specifically because of Big Sur and or the new Apple Silicon, which we'll talk about in a minute. I have some thoughts on that to share too, John. But do that. So running Apple Software Update in Mac App Store, running MacUpdater. We'll put a link in the show notes to it. Fantastic tool, one of our favorites. Reboot your Mac. I would say more frequently than normal. I usually reboot about once a week. I'm now rebooting every couple of days. I find even running MacUpdater, maybe I forget to check it or something, but rebooting kind of relaunches all of those apps that launch at startup, and they often check for updates when they launch. So you get that notification there. And then a big one that I forgot until last night, John, make sure you're staying on top. If you are someone that has used a package manager like Homebrew, make sure you're staying on top of those updates, massive amounts of updates for Big Sur. Technically, Homebrew will tell you that Homebrew isn't yet certified for Big Sur. It works fine, but all of your packages, many of them, have already published updates for Big Sur, and you want to go get all of those. So, make sure you got some time the next time you run Brew Upgrade, because it might take a little while. But those 4 things, and I'll list those in the show notes for you too. But that's what I've been doing. How about what are your thoughts on Big Sur, John? Should people upgrade?
I think I'm going to give it a try on my MacBook Pro.
Oh, so you're not running it yet?
I mean, I ran the beta.
Sure,
So
of course.
So here's one thing that you could try just to see what happened. And it prepared me for, what I'll have to wrestle with. But maybe clone whatever machine you want to upgrade and then apply the Big Sur update to the clone and see what breaks, so. Well, you suggested, make a backup. Backup. Backup.
So, right. For sure. Yes.
The thing that I predict, and you should have gotten these extensions. I got screenshots of them, but the things that you'll probably have issues with are things that are identified as legacy system extensions. And I actually got some snapshots here. So on this machine, it warned me that Kensington, because I have an expert mouse, Objective Development, which is Little Snitch, and Logitech stuff may not work. So actually, I should go to all. Well, I went to Little Snitch has a compatible update, so that's good. So I just got to download that. And then Kensington and Logitech, I just got to look and see if they have updated pref panes.
Yeah, so you identified it perfectly, right? Because the types of system extensions, not all system extensions are deprecated or disabled, I should say, in Big Sur. There are 2 types that are. One for networking. The second for USB human interface stuff. Those are the ones that Apple first put on the list of you got to fix these and not do them this way anymore. The drive, like disk related extensions, are still okay. They're not okay forever, but they are still okay now. So, if you're running things like SoftRate or things like that, no problem. That kind of thing is going to be fine. But yeah, your USB devices, your networking stuff, absolutely has to be updated or it won't. It'll be blocked. So yeah. I've been quite happy with how smooth the upgrade went. As always, I did the upgrade to my iMac in the office without being in the office. My favorite example of that was when I was in my doctor's office, I think 4 years ago, with a broken arm or something, and updated to whatever the OS at the time was over a VPN, or I triggered the update. But this I just did from the house. I don't like sitting in front of my computer while it's doing updates. Longtime listeners might have figured out that I'm an impatient cat. So I queued it up and it ran fine, and it's been running fine since. But stay on top of those updates. That's the best advice I can give. If one really, really geeky piece of advice, if you are someone that uses the Fish shell, FISH, which you can install with like Homebrew or anything like that, it has not been updated since April. I found my CPU usage for Fish spiking on both of my machines. Launching a terminal would take forever. So I've begrudgingly converted all 3 of my daily use machines over to ZSH, and shells now work fine. What I found interesting was that how many apps wind up launching through the shell, like Bartender, at least Bartender 4, which is the version that you would need for Big Sur, runs inside, like it runs a shell process to do part of whatever it does. And so Bartender would say it was taking like 100% of the CPU or something. I was like, what is this? And when I finally dug in, it was Fish that was taking it, the shell that I was running. And so I changed over to ZSH. I had to reboot the machine so that Bartender would relaunch and everything would be fine. And now it's totally fine. So hopefully they will update the Fish shell, but I was able to migrate most everything into ZSH. I found, this is super geeky, but what is the ZSH thing that I found? Oh My ZSH, John, is a great way. It's like a series of terminal scripts, I'll say, that just makes customizing your shell super easy. So definitely a hidden little cool stuff found here, an unintentional cool stuff found called Oh My ZSH. And I'll put a link to it in the show notes. But if you're using ZSH and you wanted things like the fish shell, it brings quite a bit of that functionality. And there's plugins that you can do. So like Fish's auto completion and things like that are totally doable inside ZSH in their ways. What's it? ZSH-auto completer, auto suggestions. Sorry. Yeah, I'll put a link to ZSH auto suggestions in there too. Yeah. So that way you get the fish-like auto suggestions inside ZSH shell. And I know we just got super geeky, but the name of the show, folks, is Mac Geek Gab. We afford ourselves the luxury to be geeks. Do you still use ZSH as your shell, John?
I have no idea.
Okay, so ZSH is the default shell. I want to say starting with Catalina. Someone in the chat room at live.macgeekgab.com will correct me. I hope. But yeah, you can.
No, at least on this machine, I'm running Bash.
Okay, because you haven't started that machine fresh since before
that's
Catalina.
Weird. When I go into the terminal, it says the default interactive shell is now ZSH, but I did a PS and it says I'm running Bash. So
you can check by going to the terminal and just type the word finger space whatever your short username is. So on my machines, that's Dave. But yours might be JF Braun or whatever you use as your short username. And if I do finger Dave, I can see that my shell has been ZSH. Sorry, not SH. No worries. But you're probably running Bash. Probably.
Let's see. Oh, yeah. Login, Jon-M1 Braun, name Jon-M1 Braun, directory, and shell. Bash. Yeah. So I'm running Bash.
Yeah. Okay. So you can change that with a CSF-zsh command in the terminal if you want to do that. It
says that right here.
Yeah. So, well, I was just telling everybody else. No one else but you can see your screen. So I figured for the benefit of the tens of thousands of people listening, CSF-zsh is how you change your shell in Unix. Anything more on that, John? I want to go to a question actually that came in just this morning about cloning on Big Sur, because that is one thing that's a little bit weird. And listener John said,
I got an email from some of you may have gotten an email, which I have in my inbox somewhere, but yeah, we got an email from Carbon Copy Cloner.
That's right.
Explaining. I guess you're going to explain.
No, go ahead. Take it. I'm ready to explain it, but if you want it, take it. Yep, absolutely.
No, go.
Okay. So listener John's, just the background to it was, he says, I think I may have gotten caught because I upgraded to Big Sur. No problems. It went well, but I am unable to clone my boot volume now. I'm not sure if it's my backup software or what. It says I normally use Super Duper, and I also do Time Machine backups, which seem to be working correctly. So I haven't seen anything from Super Duper from Shirt Pocket Software yet, but I'm looking to see if they have anything about Big Sur, and I don't see it on their webpage. But as John, you pointed out, there is a note from Bombic Software, who makes Carbon Copy Cloner, saying as of last week that macOS, so the issue is that the way Apple's new signed system volume works, it was no longer possible to copy the macOS system volume using normal system calls. And they dealt with it with Catalina by doing some other things, but that doesn't work on Big Sur. So the only way to make your backup disk bootable was to install Big Sur directly onto your backup disk, because that was the only way to touch the system volume there. However, macOS 11.0.1, which is what was released last week as the first public release of Big Sur, resolves some of, according to Carbon Copy Cloner, the problems in this utility that Apple provides. And Carbon Copy Cloner, as of this recording, 5.1.23 is currently available for beta testing and includes support for making bootable clones on Big Sur. So it is being fixed both by Apple and by, at least, I'm guessing Dave Nanian over at Shirt Pocket will also, incorporate these changes. Obviously, it's part of what his software does. So I think that's probably coming around. My guess is he's probably got something in beta too. So there you go. We got a link to the Carbon Copy Cloner thing, which will get you to their beta page and all of that. So yes. Funny little problems, though. These are the kinds of things that happen with, with under the hood changes, software changes. So, have you successfully? Oh, you still aren't running Big Sur. So never mind. I will. I have not installed this beta version yet. I just saw this come in this morning. So I need to do this in the office. Otherwise, it's not going to work. All right. We had
Speaking of Big Sur or trying to download it.
Yeah, well, but it got bigger than this, right? So Thursday afternoon was an interesting thing, and we got a note from Ralph, I'll read it just so that if you experienced any of these things, it might catch your attention. He says, shortly after noon on Thursday, so noon Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern time. He says, my Mac went into a tailspin, slow, no response, lots of beach balls, failed incomplete app updates, inability to start apps, attempted several reboots, initiated many force quits, checked activity monitor for road processes, a mystery which seemed to resolve itself about 2 hours later. And that is true. John and I experienced this. In fact, we experienced it right as we were supposed to start recording a thing, that the segment that may or may not be included in this episode. But yes. And I dug into it. Many people much smarter than us dug into it. I wrote a piece over at TMO that sort of pulls together what happened. But yeah, I think you're right, John, that the demand for Big Sur catalyzed some sort of system-wide failures at Apple. And one of the servers that went down is Apple's OCSP server, which doesn't sound like a big deal at all until you stop and realize that the OCSP server is responsible for authenticating certificates that app developers have to bake into their apps in order to be, Mac compliant. And when you launch an app on your Mac, and there's a lot of people screaming privacy concerns about this, and perhaps rightly so. We'll sidestep those now just to talk about the technical stuff. When you launch an app on your Mac, if your Mac is connected to the internet, it checks the certificate, the security certificate in the app, and compares it or sends out a request to Apple's OCSP server to say, hey, is this cert still valid? And the Apple server replies very quickly and says, yep, you're good to go. It then caches that response. So if you had launched an app prior, then it might not have had to check. But if you saw any problems and rebooted your machine, those caches were wiped out. And it wasn't that if Apple's server had simply been denying requests, it would have been fine. Because when the request is denied, the system says, well, let's just go with whatever the last answer was we got, no matter when that was, even if it's older than we prefer, right? And it would just plow forward. But Apple's server wasn't denying the requests. It wasn't answering them, or it was answering them, but very, very slowly. And that is what caused all of these problems, because apps couldn't launch or couldn't finish launching is more the right thing. Now, I'm hoping Apple's engineers stayed up all night on Thursday, or hopefully they didn't have to stay up all night, but I'm hoping they fixed this problem, or at least came up with a move forward path that fixes this problem.
Right.
Well,
the thing is, there used to be something in the OS, Dave, where you could have gotten around this if you knew where to look.
Okay.
So at some point, though it's no longer there, keychain access. Why keychain access? Well, keychain access lets you see lots of things, passwords, but it also lets you see certificates. And there used to be a setting in keychain access where you could configure both CRL, which is the older certificate revocation list.
Okay.
And you could also configure OCSP, which I think is Online Certificate Status Protocol. The thing is, they had settings where you could say always, I think best effort, and never. But at some point, I think Apple decided, you know what? We're not going to give the user the ability to set that. We're just going to always check using one or the other.
Right. Yeah.
If because that's where I looked, I'm like, well, what if I thought after the fact,
yeah,
that could have solved the problem.
Sure.
But yeah, so I'm guessing, they're going to reconfigure their networking code to not be so insistent.
Well, I guess so I see two ways of solving this problem that still maintains this type of security. Again, there are other security concerns, namely that Apple can know where you were and what app you launched at what time. That's a whole other thing that Apple's going to have to wrestle with now, and probably should have wrestled with in the past, to figure out how to obscure that so that they aren't even in a position to be able to track that data. I'm assuming they don't track it, but that doesn't mean that they couldn't. And that's more the point. But I think there are two ways to do this. Number one is to shorten the timeout in macOS. Like, it seemed like it was waiting forever. If you waited long enough, it would have timed out and your apps would have launched. So that, it felt like to me that the timeout was in the range of minutes. I think it should be about 10 seconds. And if you don't get an answer, plow forward or cache or parallelize the thing, right? And wait for an answer, but let the app launch. And then if there's a problem, we'll alert the user, but don't make the user sit there and wait, right? So I think they should do something like that so that no matter what happens on the server side, this can't happen again and crater a bunch of Macs and send people into a tailspin. The other thing Apple could do, and probably should do, hopefully is doing or has done, is separate those OCSP servers out so that they're not running, or at least a redundant version of them is not running on all of the same places that, say, the Big Sur updates are, or something else that could crater them and take them down. So hopefully they will do both. They're kind of a big company. Well, they sort of have a lot of money.
I mean, the thing is, that's enterprise networking 101.
Right. Right.
Is use a CDN for your don't have a single point of failure. And it sounds like they had a single point of failure.
Totally. Right. That's the single point of failure. Well said. Yeah. Yeah. So hopefully we don't ever see this again. The workaround was, and the folks over at Tidbits, I think it was Adam and Josh who figured it out, but it was certainly Adam that posted it. But the workaround was to, and this is, you thought we got geeky talking about shells earlier? Well, just you wait. The workaround was to go in to your shell, edit your Etsy hosts file, and point ocsp.apple.com at something that would fail, preferably 0.0.0.0, some IP address that doesn't have an OCSP server and would deny the request immediately. And then boom, you're done. All your apps would have launched freely by then. So yeah. So there you go. All right, let's, are we good on that one? Can we plow forward? There's some M1 questions. Yep. And then the good news is we have approval to share the thing that we did on Thursday afternoon. So I want to do that too, because it's very important Thunderbolt information coming to you, and it's going to blow your minds just like it blew ours. All right. And first, we have a couple of things. So let's talk about the M1s, the new Apple chips. I know we had a long conversation about those on Tuesday, and that was so that we could have these questions and give some context for them. Listener Russell says, I watched your recap of the announcement, and he said, wait, where are we here? Yeah. Right. He said, I think the graphs they were showing at the start of the presentation answer your questions about the CPU. He says, it seems like the Air is limited to 10 watts. 10 watts is the thermal envelope of the MacBook Air. And he went on to speculate how that was the thing that would separate the performance of the Air from the performance of the Pro. I don't want to do a whole lot of speculation on this because hopefully in the next week we will have honest to goodness answers about the performance of the M1 in the Pro versus the Air versus the Mac Mini. But we are starting to get those already by way of Geekbench results. Geekbench's browser saves your test results if you let it. And sure enough, there are some Apple Silicon tests there in the Geekbench browser. In fact, there have been Apple Silicon tests in the Geekbench browser for a very long time. Most of them, though, were made with the ADP 3.2 system, which is the developer kit. And the developer kit, just for reference, scores 4,800 on the multi-core score in this. This week, though, and this changes by the hour because these machines are out there and people are running Geekbench on them, presumably developers and reviewers. But the MacBook Pro 17,1, the MacBook Air 10,1, and I believe it's the Mac Mini 9,1. Yes, all have this M1 chip in them. And you can look, if you do the right search in Geekbench, which we will put in the show notes. And for those of you watching along live, I will also put it in the chat room at live.macgeekgab.com. But if you look, the multi-core scores for all three of these are basically exactly the same. I mean, every score is going to be off a little bit. Even on your same machine, running it again, you will see slight variations. But these are all within a few percentage points of each other. And they basically clock in at about 7,600 on the multi-core. Now, this is Geekbench running natively on these machines on the M1. Geekbench was updated to support Apple Silicon. So this is native scores, 7,600 for all of them. MacBook Pro, MacBook Air, Mac Mini. They all come in the same. For a point of reference, John, you got the i7 MacBook Pro 16-inch, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that clocks in at about 6,800, 6,900. So these are about 10% faster, at least in terms of multi-core CPU scores, than the top-end 16-inch MacBook Pro. So just to put that in reference, that's 5 times faster than my 2018 Air, and you can do all the other math there. Geekbench has all of those. You can have fun searching things. But these CPUs run fast, and they all run at the same speed. Now, why is there a fan in the MacBook Pro? I don't know. I think there's 2 reasons for it, potentially. One is that they used the same structure and chose to just leave the fan there. Although they took it out of the Air, but the Air is the #1 selling Mac, so it would make sense they spent a little more time on the Air in this round than they did the Pro. Number 2 is that perhaps there is some thermal corner, and when the CPU hits it, the Pro can kick in the fan and run faster for longer, and the Air cannot, and so it has to slow down the CPU to manage heat. Either of those things could be true. Again, we will find out this week as these machines get into our hands. So I think we'll leave it at that. What do you think about that, John?
I'd like to get a data sheet on the M1.
You will not.
There's a lot of things we don't know.
This is the problem, right? Because Intel chips, Intel publishes the data sheets because they sell the chips. And they also want to convince their partners by way of their customers to use their new chips. Well, Apple has one customer and it's called Apple. And so that's how it goes.
Yeah. But I mean, Apple, they're making this chip. I'm wondering if they ever considered maybe selling this chip to someone who's not Apple.
Maybe, but
like Intel. I mean, they got a fab. They're making them.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't see that happening. I don't see Apple becoming
Yeah,
a chip company for others. I think Apple does what Apple does. Right? You know what I mean? Like that's kind of I don't know. That's my thought on it. All right, we'll find out. It's very interesting. Like I said, there's a lot of speculation right now about all of this, and we will learn, and then we will share because it's what we do. There was one other thing about the M1, right, John? You had a question from listener John?
So John had a comment here. So quick question about the new M1 system on a chip. Since the DRAM is actually in the system on a chip, that means that the end user cannot add more DRAM to the system, correct? If so, I'm not sure how I feel about that. I tend to run a lot of virtual machines, so I need a lot of DRAM. According to Apple's store, 16 gigs is the max. This really isn't enough if you are running multiple virtual machines. Apple is slowly making their systems completely user unupgradable. Well, yeah, that's happened already.
Yeah, right. It's already there. Yeah. Well, not with the Mini, though, right? The Mini was user upgradable.
The one I have is, yes. And I think the iMac still, as far as RAM is concerned, the Intel versions.
Correct.
But not the M1 version. The M1 Mini is not user upgradable. So anyways, so he says, I have an old 2009 iMac with 24 gigs of RAM, and I tend to run out of memory with it. Because of that, I will seriously have to think about remaining in the Mac environment or moving over to Linux. I really wish they would come out with the consumer version of the Mac Pro that would still be fully user customizable. So I had high hopes for Apple Silicon, but now I'm definitely in a quandary and would appreciate your thoughts. And at least my thought, Dave, was that I agree with his assessment. So yeah, all the spec sheets, there's nothing greater than 16 gigs of RAM. And as I mentioned, it's not a good sign that, they kind of went backwards with the Mini in that my current Mini, I can actually upgrade the memory if I want to. But the M1 Mini, you can't.
Right.
But I don't know if we have enough information at this point, Dave, because we don't have the aforementioned spec sheet to conclude that 16 gigs is the maximum RAM that the M1 can address. If so, to me, that seems kind of short-sighted. While that's enough RAM for most people, he identified applications that 16 gigs is not enough. My speculation, Dave, is that, and actually I think Gruber also said this in his assessment here, there may be a M2 coming out soon. And that the machines that they didn't already upgrade may have a chip that can address more memory. Because, again, I still love this spec sheet because I can't imagine they would make a processor where a modern processor can address,
oh yeah,
more than that.
Yeah. It's certainly, like we said on Tuesday, I think this is the memory controller from the iPad Pro, being baked in together. I think that's just, this is what we get. And it's really, really important for us to remember that in Apple's eyes, regardless of how we interpret these things, in Apple's eyes, I think it's fair to say that the Air, the low-end MacBook Pro, which is what this one is, or what this one replaces, and the Mini are entry-level machines for the masses, right? For the general public. Yes, this computer has the name, one of these computers has the name Pro on it, but it has never been a Pro, right? The low-end MacBook Pro has always been, would you like an Air with a touch bar, sir? And if the answer is yes, then buy that one. It's $200 more, $100 more, whatever it's been, and Apple's gone sort of, oddly navigated this path. It's always been a question. This is not a question that's new as of this last week. We've always been asking, like, what's the real difference between the Air and the low-end Pro? And sometimes there's a gap and then the Air fills it in. And then, there's this game of leapfrog. So that's exactly what we're seeing here. We are not seeing any computers that Apple sees as high end Even an iMac, which we could have an argument about where does that fit in versus the iMac Pro and, all of that. But, none of those machines are on Apple Silicon yet. So I think you're right. There is some M2 thing. I also, again, we could spin yarn about this all day, but I think it's worth remembering that it's not just the DRAM that's moved into the system on a chip. The SSD controller has also moved into the system on a chip. So the whole line between RAM and virtual memory / swap space really starts to get a little more blurred when you've got a super fast SSD controller that's talking directly to the chip system and not having to go through an external bus or a bus that's external to that, right? So I mean, I know there's a difference. The line is not blurred. Here's DRAM, here's the SSD, right? There's no question there. But in terms of what it means for performance when something has to shift from DRAM to SSD to be, virtualized and make room in DRAM, again, we will find out. But this is a whole different thing. Go ahead. Yeah.
Or I'm curious if the various virtualization technologies out there, what if they ask for more than 16? Will they get it, and then the OS is smart enough to make part of it swap and part of it not, and that you won't really notice because, you know what I'm saying?
That's happening already. I mean, you could set up a VM and to have more RAM than you have physical RAM, and it'll just deal. It's sometimes better than others.
I've never actually tried that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe, all right. So maybe if you do try this on the M1 and ask for more physical memory than is there, it'll just figure it out.
Yeah. We need an emulation engine for the M1 first, and I don't think those yet quite exist, at least not for us to be able to use. So, All right. Good. Fun. All right. So I want to share this Thunderbolt segment with you. We will give you a little bit of prep on what exactly that is. But there's lots of other stuff to talk about too. So the next thing that I want to do here, John, is I want to talk about our sponsors, if that works for you.
Excellent.
All right. So this holiday season, you want the best deal in wireless. And you know where you're going to find that? Mint Mobile. Because right now, when you switch to Mint Mobile and buy any 3-month plan, you get another 3 months for free. That's amazing. They were already like the best prices, and now they're twice the best. As the first company to sell their premium wireless service online only, Mint Mobile lets you safely order from home and maximize your savings. And the plans start at just $15 a month. As you know, John and I have both been using Mint Mobile since long before this holiday deal. And I have to say, this is a great time to switch. This is great. 3 months, get 3 months. I mean, boy, they make it easy. I guess that's good. You know what? It's 2020. We deserve something easy like this. So thanks to Mint Mobile for doing that, right? Of course, all their plans come with unlimited talk and text and high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. And you can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone number along with all your existing contacts. Of course, your new iPhones 12 will all work with these. It's all good. And if you're not 100% satisfied, Mint Mobile has got you covered. 7-day money-back guarantee. So for a limited time, buy any 3-month Mint Mobile plan and get 3 more months free by going to mintmobile.com/MGG. That's mintmobile.com/MGG. You got to use our link to cut your wireless bill to just $15 a month at mintmobile.com/MGG. Our thanks to Mint Mobile for sponsoring this episode. You know what's fun? Setting up a server. You know what's more fun? Setting up a server when you know that the nitty-gritty hard stuff is going to be handled by somebody else. And that's where our next sponsor, Linode, comes in. Because when you visit linode.com/MGG, you get to set up a server for yourself to do whatever you need it to do. And the cool part is they have like an app store. They call it their marketplace. But this is where it gets really great, because if you want to set up, let's say, WordPress or Ruby on Rails or OpenVPN or Percona for a database, you want to set up a WireGuard VPN, you want to set up Minecraft, you just click the button, answer some questions, and you're good to go. This is the beauty of the way Linode works. You know what else is beautiful? Linode is going to give you $100 in free credit just for being a listener of this show. Now, you got to visit the link that I already mentioned, Linode, linode.com/MGG, to take advantage of that. Go do it now. Give yourself something fun to do over the holidays here, something good to set up to get your business going good for next year. All there at linode.com/MGG. Our thanks to Linode for sponsoring this episode. I've talked about how much I love my Nebia by Moen shower, and I won't stop talking about it because this thing's amazing. It is so luscious showering in there. And because the Nebia by Moen, it atomizes the water so that it heats up the environment of your shower, right? It's not just, the water aiming straight at your head, but because it's doing this atomization of the water, it's just sort of going everywhere, but it's still really strong, like good rinse factor. My wife finds this amazing. She really loves it. And what's even better is there's a wand that you can get with it too. And you can position the wand to be like aimed like at your middle back so that you get this 360-degree thing going on. Tim Cook was Nebia's first investor. They were self-funded up until that point. Very cool stuff. They know what they're doing, and you save water while you're doing it. You know what else you get to save? You get to save a little money. You get 15% off site-wide right now for the first 100 listeners of this show to use code MGG. That's right, Mac Geek Gab, MGG. These codes are going fast. Your listening brethren are using them. Please, you don't want to miss this deal. So go to Nebia.com/MGG, take a look at everything, and use coupon code MGG when checking out. One last time, that's Nebia.com/MGG, and our thanks to Nebia for creating Nebia by Moen and for sponsoring this episode. All right, John. Well, so we mentioned Thursday's problems where there were glitches, and we mentioned that you and I got together right at the moment that these problems began. Well, it wasn't just the two of us. We had Larry O'Connor scheduled and to record a short video segment that we're about to show you here because we needed to get to the bottom of Thunderbolt. Specifically, Thunderbolt 4. What does it mean? What doesn't it mean? What matters about Thunderbolt to us Mac users? What doesn't matter to Thunderbolt 4 about us for us Mac users? Why is it a big deal? Why did Apple make it so nebulous on their M1 spec sheet that it says Thunderbolt /USB 4, but then in the specs lists Thunderbolt 3 and USB 3? Like, what does all this mean? There's been lots of stuff going back and forth, and we figured the best person to have answer that question was Larry, because if they don't understand Thunderbolt, we're all screwed anyway. And thankfully, we're not, because they do. Now, you will get to peek into the worlds of John and I as we different camera angles for us, for those of you that are watching the video, and different microphones for us, for those of you that are just listening to the audio. Because of the problems that we had getting this to work, we couldn't get our normal studio machines and the software that we use to do this to launch because of Apple's OCSP server, because we didn't figure it out at the time, because we had scheduled to be with Larry and we didn't want to waste his time. So we did this on a Zoom call and it worked out fine. And so, we're happy to include it here. Anything else you want to do before we set this up, John, before we launch with Larry?
Nope. I mean, Larry and his group are the experts, as far as I'm concerned, because they make Thunderbolt stuff. So
right.
Who better to ask?
Yeah, I will. We'll talk about it when it's finished. So without further ado, Larry, thanks for coming on the show to help explain Thunderbolt and Thunderbolt 4, Thunderbolt 3. Of course, this is Larry O'Connor from Otherworld Computing at macsales.com. It's great to have you back on the show.
Yeah, it's been way too long. Thanks for having me.
Way too long. Yeah. So Thunderbolt 4, Thunderbolt 3. You guys have a Thunderbolt 4 product. You have lots of Thunderbolt 3 products. Apple has a product this week that's labeled Thunderbolt/USB 4. Tell us why. I want to know what Thunderbolt 4 is versus Thunderbolt 3, why we as Mac users either care or don't care.
Well, the truth of the matter is, a Mac user, there's really not a lot here with Thunderbolt 4. Thunderbolt 4 really applies to PCs. And why it applies to PCs is that, whereas on the Mac, from the very first Macs with Thunderbolt 3, we've had all the capabilities that Thunderbolt has had to offer. This isn't the case in PC Windows land. On a PC, there's a variety of different ways that Thunderbolt could be implemented. And a lot of those did not include all the features and capabilities, display support, the full 40 gigabits of bandwidth, power delivery. Some PCs, that are labeled Thunderbolt 3 even need to have an additional card installed before you can actually connect Thunderbolt 3 devices. Apple, from day one, we got the whole show. We got everything that Thunderbolt could offer. And every Thunderbolt Mac that has this port, it has this Type-C connection, is able to connect with all Thunderbolt 3 and Thunderbolt 4 devices. And that's something else that's not going to be the case on the PC. Apple controls the ecosystem. So when we're looking at Thunderbolt 3 or Thunderbolt 4 devices, when Apple issues an OS update, they're able to control what features become available. On the PC, you don't have that. So whereas it is possible for some Thunderbolt 3 PCs to support some of the new features that have been announced with Thunderbolt 4, even though Thunderbolt 4 is really Thunderbolt 3, which we can go back and forth on. It's confusing. I love what Apple did. Not all PCs will ever be able to use Thunderbolt 4 because that is now dependent on individual manufacturers, individual implementations, and what those folks choose to support. We've got it really good being on the Mac side. And to really answer your question, because it's every time I try to do this, it's so simple, but it's so complicated because Intel wanted to call it Thunderbolt 4. Apple made it really simple. They just called it Thunderbolt because Thunderbolt on Mac hasn't changed. We still have Thunderbolt is still, everything is fantastic today as it was when we first had Thunderbolt 3, on those 2016 machines. The only thing that we do now have, that they did badge under Thunderbolt 4 with peripherals is a new hubbing technology. And this is great. It lets us add more Thunderbolt ports, to an existing Mac. And we waited years to do this.
Okay, so hubbing is the new thing that we get. Do we get this with the M1 based Macs that Apple announced this week, depending on when you're listening?
This is a new feature of Thunderbolt. And it's not limited to Thunderbolt 3 or Thunderbolt 4. It's a new Thunderbolt feature that is available for all of us through macOS 11. Just like with previous Thunderbolt chipsets and new features, a new update, it's taking a new Apple OS, a new update to the OS, typically enables these features. And now it's for the first time ever with the OWC Thunderbolt Hub and Apple's macOS 11 Big Sur that we can add more Thunderbolt ports.
So wait a minute. You're telling me that I can take my 2019 iMac that only has 2 Thunderbolt ports. I can get your hub or someone else's hub. Of course, yours the only one I know about. Right. Yeah. But in theory, any hub that supports hubbing and
any Thunderbolt hub, it's got to be Thunderbolt hub.
Not USB. Right. And attach that to my 2019 iMac and now because I'm running, or I will be running macOS Big Sur 11, whatever version, however we want to say it, that will give me hubbing, not just on the new Macs, but on the old ones too.
Correct.
That's outstanding.
Now to be clear, so there's actually, I just want to verify this, but I'm looking here. So Intel has a data sheet. Intel makes the Thunderbolt 4 chip. Yes?
Oh, yeah. Well, they don't really, it's not a chip anymore. Here, we have two different.
Well, they mention in their write-up here, they say it's going to be part of Tiger Lake. And then they also mention on this sheet here that there's a let me see.
We have Thunderbolt 4
4 controller
chipsets.
8000. So it looks like there are a couple of ways that they're deploying this, but isn't it all boiling down to being a piece of Intel technology?
Well, Thunderbolt went open source. Intel opened the Thunderbolt standard up last year.
Right. Okay.
And if you look at the Mac, the new M1 Mac, that's actually the first system with non-Intel silicon to have Thunderbolt support.
Interesting. Okay.
But going on, West Thunderbolt 4, Thunderbolt 4 does, and this is the thing, there's no USB 4 peripherals, and Apple is not currently supporting USB 4, but Thunderbolt 4 technically incorporates USB 4, which is also backwards compatible with 3.2 and 3.1 Gen 2, 10 gigabit, and all the way back down to USB 2. So the only thing that's different, from Thunderbolt 3 on a PC, from a PC with Thunderbolt 4 is also, well, let me take that back. The only thing that's different between a Mac with Thunderbolt 3 and a PC with Thunderbolt 4 is that Thunderbolt 4 also promises that you can use USB 4 devices at full speed. But in terms of Thunderbolt capabilities are still the same under so-called Thunderbolt 4 as they have been with Thunderbolt 3. It just means if I buy a PC, which I don't plan to, but if I do buy a PC and it says it has Thunderbolt 4, there's no longer any fine print about exactly what parts of Thunderbolt are there.
I see. So Thunderbolt 4 is a marketing term that Intel is using to do essentially what Apple has done on Macs all the way through, that when you see Thunderbolt 4 on a PC, you're getting the full feature set. It won't be certified from Thunderbolt 4 if it doesn't have all the features. Is that the right way to say it?
That's absolute. There's no optionality with Thunderbolt 4 on the PC, whereas there was with Thunderbolt 3.
Got it.
Apple had that optionality, but Apple chose to always include the full implementation. They've always given us everything. And, kudos to Apple for doing that with Thunderbolt 3 and keeping that door open so that, like I said, this new hubbing technology, a simple OS update, well, maybe not such a simple OS update, but an OS update, move on to Big Sur, and now you can add more ports for the first time.
That's outstanding. Okay, you have explained this better than anyone ever has, and I knew you were the right one to get on here to tell us this. So I do have another question to ask you, though, and it's about cables.
Awesome.
Does Thunderbolt 4 finally bring us the one cable to rule them all?
It does, absolutely. Thunderbolt 4 cables, again, considered a marketing position, and it's going to be confused between the Mac and if every PC had done what Apple did, we still have Thunderbolt 3.
Got it.
But the new Thunderbolt 4 cables are absolutely 100% universal, and universal in the sense that whether you connect it, it's obviously C to C, but whether it's a USB port you're going off of, whether it's a power brick, whether it's, whether your power adapter is powering your laptop, whether it's a Thunderbolt 3 device, Thunderbolt 4 device, although Thunderbolt 3 and 4 devices technically are all Thunderbolt 3. But to the main point, if it says Thunderbolt 4, whatever the maximum performance, maximum power that device and that host support working together, that cable will provide. None of this stuff like you have now where some of the longer Thunderbolt 3 cables, are half speed.
Yeah.
Or if it's an active Thunderbolt cable, it works great for Thunderbolt, but then it's only USB 2 speeds if they connect it from a USB 2 device, or USB 10G device, or those Type-C cables. And Type-C is actually, I would say USB-C cables are almost kind of a risk out there.
Oh, yeah.
They look the same, but not all Type-C cables are certified to carry power.
Right.
And
not all of them can carry the same speeds of data, as many listeners to this show have found out trying to use their Apple cable with a hard drive. Yeah.
That is the number one tech support call we get. If it's not a Type-C cable that they plugged in, it's the Apple Type-C cable. And it's an Apple cable. It's great quality. Why is my dock not working? Why is my USB dock not working? Let alone a Thunderbolt device. And it's go, well, yeah, it's up to 100 watts on the cable. The cable's power is safe, but it's only if you use that to connect a data device or a dock, even our USB 10 port dock, it operates at USB 2. A lot of things don't work over USB 2.
That was my disappointment when, when I got this new machine. it came with an 85 watt adapter and a cable. And I'm like, oh, well, this does data and power. Well, kind of. As you said, the cable that Apple ships does USB 2, but it does full power. It'll handle the 85 watts or whatever the adapter. So I eventually found a cable, as you know, Dave has, I'm sure, that will do full power and full, full speed, but it was kind of hit and miss because I bought a few cables that I had to return because they wouldn't offer all of the functionality. It was very
there you go, Larry.
Bought them from us, you would have been just fine.
Well, of course. Yes. But with Thunderbolt 4, if a cable says Thunderbolt 4 on it, we're good to go. It will do all of those things. And should we expect those cables to be like super expensive, middle of the road? Where are we going to find those when they find them?
No, they're going to be really reasonable. 1 meter Thunderbolt 4 cables are going to be in the $20 to $24 range, okay. Which, and mind you, this is a cable not just certified for Thunderbolt and up to 40 gigabits of data, but it's also fully certified for the 100 watts of carrying current. So it's not just somebody saying it's 100 watts. Sure. These are officially certified. All of our cables, including our USB cables that carry power, go through actual power certification and have real certificates, for that operation. I mean, they're easy. I mean, we don't just say, oh, well, it should work and go. And I'll be honest, in terms of Apple and the data only being USB 2, an Apple cable is always going to carry the maximum 100 watts that anything you plug USB-C into could put out. Right. I'd much rather have an issue with how much data it does than have an issue with a cable that, sure can carry all the data, but maybe it's not really designed. It's not been built to properly handle, 60 watts, 85 watts, or 100 watts. And then you plug it into something that takes that draw and it's putting that current through and you wonder, wow, that cable's getting hot. This is something we don't have to worry about with Thunderbolt. Thunderbolt cables are certified through and through. And Thunderbolt 4 cables, now it's not going to matter. Right. Power, USB, Thunderbolt, whatever it is that's C2C, the maximum capability will always be engaged with a Thunderbolt 4 cable. So you can cut all those other cables up and end, those cable nightmares.
All right. So you have delivered not only fantastic news, but easy to understand news for us. And that's the key with all of this. I really want to thank you for coming on the show, Larry. This has been super enlightening. And I can't imagine a better person to have explained this all to us. In fact, I don't know where I would find them. So thanks for agreeing to do this, man.
No, I appreciate you doing it. I mean, I hope we have the largest selection of Thunderbolt solutions, the best Thunderbolt solutions on the planet. If I couldn't talk about this, there'd be something really seriously wrong here. But this is our backyard. This is our space. And really, I've been thinking about this and working on communicating this for a long time. And again, I really so applaud Apple for not coming out and calling it Thunderbolt 4. They call it what it is. Yeah. Thunderbolt with /USB 4. And even if you look at the specs on the M1 Max, they specifically say Thunderbolt 3. And it's not because it's not Thunderbolt 4. It's because Thunderbolt 4 really isn't Thunderbolt 4.
Well, there you have it, folks. Larry O'Connor from Otherworld Computing explains Thunderbolt 4 to us. They have this stuff. They've tested it. As Larry mentioned, they're the first vendor, at least, to announce a Thunderbolt hub. I believe we can get them in November. There was a question in the chat room, John, that I wanted to address. We wound up chatting with Larry for a while after this, as you might imagine. And Warren in the chat room at live.macgeekgab.com says this finally makes the 2-port argument go away. And that is true, sort of, right? I mean, on a laptop, there are moments where having extra ports portable with you full time are handy. And also so that you're not necessarily having to carry a Thunderbolt hub with you, right? But also it is important to remember that each Thunderbolt controller, and I believe in the 4-port machines, there are 2 controllers, each with 2 ports, but I might have that wrong, especially on these new ones where we don't really know yet. Each controller, potentially each port, but certainly each controller is limited to 40 gigabits per second of Thunderbolt. So whatever you hang, yes, you can hub now with Big Sur, but it doesn't magically add bandwidth to the port. So the upstream bandwidth to the port plugged into your Mac is still 40 gigabits per second. So depending on how you're using it, you need to sort of balance that. And that's not any different than what we deal with now in terms of, are you going to hang your, high-speed hard drive off of the same port that you're hanging your, super hoopty monitor that's you got to send a lot of data to, or are you hanging, several hard drives off, or whatever that is. It's still 40 gigabits, in and out of the computer. That could become the weakest link in the chain, especially if you start going nuts with hubbing. So extra ports still have their place, but for someone like me with this 2019 iMac in front of me, where, I've got a Thunderbolt audio device, I've got a Thunderbolt hard drive. Well, there's the two things that will end my chains. That's no longer the case. At least once I'm willing to upgrade this Mac to Big Sur. We'll see. Maybe Thunderbolt hubbing will be the thing that pushes me there sooner rather than later. So,
yeah. So you're right. I just checked on my MacBook Pro, and if you go into the system info, it shows 2 Thunderbolt ports, even though the machine has 4 ports. But yeah, like you said, there's 2 Thunderbolt controllers.
Okay, right. And I think, based on the way Apple explained it to me, I think in that machine, it's actually one Intel board that has the 2 Thunderbolt controllers on it. But I mean, that's just nitpicking. Yeah. So cool. All right. Well, that's, I'm so excited about this. Like, Larry blew my mind. I knew most of the stuff that Larry was going to tell us in this. When he said that Big Sur brought hubbing to all Thunderbolt 3 machines, that, like, I've been eagerly awaiting approval. They needed to test it. And like I said, we recorded this in the moment before that came out. So no one could download it because of all the problems we mentioned. So it's like, you got to wait to publish. I'm like, okay, we'll wait to publish, but I'm really eager to publish, Larry. So yeah.
It's interesting that this is something that's enabled by the operating system.
Yeah.
Though.
Yeah. Well, as he said, they opened...
It's like unlocking a hidden feature. Oh gosh.
I don't think it's a hidden feature. I think it's a result of Thunderbolt being opened up, and which only happened in the last year, and now software being able to sort of do more things.
Or one that you can. Okay, because I'm thinking back. I mean, this was ages ago, but remember there was an iPod Touch that had a Bluetooth chip, but they didn't initially enable it, and then all of a sudden, they're like, "Oh yeah, let's turn on the Bluetooth chip in this device." And,
right.
And there was much rejoicing, but
it
was essentially hidden until they, from what I recall, they issued a iOS update and all of a sudden you could use the Bluetooth on it. So
that's right. Yeah. I remember that. I don't, based on, and now you all know as much as we do. Like you heard the meat of that conversation, obviously. I didn't get the sense that this was some hidden hardware feature. I think it was, they call it hubbing. It is more appropriately switching, if you want to get truly technical about it. So I think it was more of I think it more is a software feature of, okay, we're going to allow this to be able to see down the Thunderbolt chain to this other thing. Here's what we all agreed to do. So, I don't know. We will find out more. How's that sound? So I think we have we've gone through some long tips. So we've started the show out with the long jams. Now I think we can go to some, short little pop songs by way of quick tips, which is usually how we start the show. So let's go, if we can, to Adam here. And I am vamping because I didn't get this ready during the thing. But Adam says, I don't know if this qualifies as a quick tip, but I just discovered it and I thought it was cool. When updating a whole bunch of apps at once in iOS, you can select one that is waiting to be installed and grayed out by pressing the icon and holding. When you do this, you will be given the option to prioritize the download of that app. He said it is great when there's one app waiting for download, but you want to use it right away. So this is on either the home screen. It is on the home screen or on the app library screen. So it's not in the App Store. So you start all your updates. Let's say you have, 50 updates or whatever. Start them all. And then either go to the home screen where you see the app with the waiting underneath it, or in the app library, once you see waiting underneath it, press and hold on that. And then you get the option to prioritize download. I don't know how long that's been there. It's new for me and helpful. So I used it just the other night. So pretty cool, huh? Have you tried that one yet, John?
No.
Okay. It's fun. It's good. Might be helpful for people that are restoring their new phones from iCloud. If you have an app that needs to update, that wouldn't be a bad thing. So, all right. You want to take us to Lewis's quick tip here, John? Mr. Braun?
Lewis has a quick tip. All right. I've had a Mac issue that was pretty annoying to solve, and I thought I would share. My Mac on Big Sur release candidate had a file in the trash that is 5.5 gigs. It is the DMG part of the Mojave installer app. Oddly, the file was in a .trash folder in my iCloud Drive folder. I'm not going to read the directory, but he gives us the directory.
Sure.
Well, library, mobile documents, COM, Apple, you follow that path, and there may be a trash folder in there. As you can see, nothing else remains from the package, just the DMG file. So things he tried: rebooting in safe mode, rebooting into Catalina, mounting the Big Sur drive and trying to delete the file, trying to find the file on iCloud.com. The folder is not shown as expected. Running disk first aid on the BS and BS-data drives from recovery. And lastly, reboot into recovery mode and try to delete the file from the recovery terminal, which is not obvious. But there is an option to run the terminal in recovery. The last one worked. Of course, I had to use this utility to mount and unlock the data drive. So that's a good tip for those stubborn files. I'm having one too, Dave, and I don't know what's causing it. So you remember we were, I was wrestling with that PDS service with Evernote.
Yeah.
And where you put those things, AppleScript or otherwise, is in your home folder, library, PDF services.
Right.
Here's what's been happening lately, Dave, and I don't know why. So maybe a challenge for somebody. But then when I go to the menu on that machine, the print menu, I see that appear twice. I'm like, well, why is it appearing twice? And so I look in that folder, and sure enough, it's in there twice. There's the app itself, and then there's a shortcut to it, which is one way of deploying it. But Dave, I keep deleting it, and it keeps coming back, which really concerns me.
So I think that folder, when now that you're saying this, there's something going off in my head. So I keep all of those Apple scripts in a folder in my it's actually my Synology Drive folder, so that it's whenever I make an update to it, it's synced to all of my Macs. And I have a shortcut pointing to that file in my Synology Drive folder. I think there was something about that folder, and this is going back ages, so the memories are cloudy, and we probably should be playing ethereal music or something. But I think there was something about that folder only wanting aliases in it, shortcuts in it. And so maybe try moving it out and, delete both, right? But after having moved it out or copied it out, and then just shortcut back to it and see if it only gives you one. Because I dealt with this too. I had two in there for the longest time. And then when I decided to do this sync thing, that went away. So I think there might be something to that. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. I'll redo it.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing I had happen, Dave, also is, so, with new devices, I had to shuffle things around, like getting rid of the backups of my old devices so I could do backups of the new devices with iMazing or Apple's utility or whatever. And I ran Omni Disk Sweeper to, look at some point at what was taking up a lot of space. And one thing that was taking up a lot of space was my iMazing iDevice backups from long ago. Apparently at some point, I don't know if it was a bug or something, but they weren't purging old backups. normally you can set how many it maintains, 5, 10, whatever works for you. I think I have it set at 10.
Sure.
So I deleted that, and that was taking up a ton of space.
Right,
the
right.
thing is, it was not reflected in my free space. And I kept, so I had like about 300 gigs of space, but I noticed that number was going lower and lower. So I decided to delete some stuff, and I deleted like 100 gigs worth of stuff, and it was still showing that I had less and less free space available. At some point, actually, TechTool chimed in. So TechTool can, among other things, tell you if you're running below a certain threshold of free space. And it was like, whoa, you only have 90 gigs free. And I'm like, what? Why are you deleting this stuff? And I think we've concluded in the past, but another warning for people is that APFS looks to be kind of lazy about actually freeing up the space until it gets like critically low. But here's what worked for me. Someone submitted this tip a while ago, and it worked this time around too, Dave. Boot Camp, the Boot Camp app.
Yeah.
Boot Camp installer, I think it's called.
It's been so long since
Boot Camp Assistant.
Boot Camp Assistant.
If you run Boot Camp Assistant, I saw it going through things. It was like, deleting snapshots, and then it was like deleting iCloud cache, whatever, something. And I'm like, and eventually when it was done, I then again had 300 gigs or so free on my hard drive. So Boot Camp Assistant, for whatever mysterious reason, gets the empties the trash when other things will not, or at least cleans out caches and stuff.
Interesting. Huh. Did you look in Carbon Copy Cloner to see if it was an old snapshot that needed to be purged out?
There were snapshots, but they were taking on the order of like megabytes. They weren't taking up gigabytes.
So it wasn't, okay, so that wasn't it. Fascinating. Huh.
Yeah, though that's another, actually you bring up a good point though, is that's another strategy if you're running low on free space, is delete some of your snapshots.
Boot Camp Assistant. Okay, tell me what you did with Boot Camp. I mean, of course, this all is moot because there's no Boot Camp Assistant on.
You just run it.
Mac. Yep.
You just run it, and it says, "All right, I'm going to set things up here before I try to partition space." And it goes through a number of steps, and whatever those steps were, one was clearing out snapshots, and then another, the message flew by. I should have taken a snapshot, but it was like clearing iCloud caches or something. But whatever it did.
That would do it.
Whatever measures it takes to, because, the what it's doing is, hey, I want to make sure you have enough space so you can actually create a boot camp partition.
Right. Oh, no, it's smart. It makes sense that it would do all these things. Yeah. Okay. Fun. All right. We're going to abandon quick tips because we can't do anything quick today. We are in long jam mode, and it's great. So we both had new devices arrive on Friday, John. No, so you're misleading people because you have a problem with your carrier that you need to leave. But I want to talk about the devices. So let's do this. So we both had iPhone 12 minis arrive on Friday, on release day. I will share my thoughts, but go. I want to hear you have had the biggest change because you've gone from Team Home Button with an iPhone 8 to an iPhone 12 mini with, Face ID and full screen and glory and OLED display, all of that stuff. So I'm curious, forget about your carrier for a minute. I don't want to hear, I was going to say, I don't want to hear complaints. If you have complaints about the phone, I'm very curious about that. But let's forget about your carrier for a minute and let's talk about your phone. So what has this transition been like?
It's pretty straightforward. So the transition utility on the two phones is really cool. Basically I had the 12, I put the 8 near it, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, you want to, you want to migrate this phone over? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So, and it took about an hour to migrate all the data over. And they warn you about that. So that part was fine.
Okay.
And then, the carrier part, I'll tell you the story later, but not now. My reaction though is, so it's a size that I like. I've already gotten used to, I was resistant to not having a home button. I mean, the Air kind of prepared me for that because my new iPad Air doesn't have a home button either. I have no home buttons anymore.
Right. I've lost my home.
Well, I just always thought it was a brilliant way of allowing the user to get to a known state. Mm-hmm. Now, the thing is, it did introduce a mechanical component, which, especially with past iPhones, would actually have problems or get all gummed up and stuff. So I can understand why they want to get rid of it.
Well, I don't think your 8 was a mechanical home button, right? I think the 8 was...
It may not have been, but I definitely had issues with the past phone.
Sure.
In that the button eventually stopped working.
Right.
Yeah, on the 8, it's haptic, but I guess it's not really mechanical.
Right.
Well, the haptic part kind of is. But anyways, so here's what I like. Even though the phone itself is physically smaller, I get more screen real estate, so that's nice.
Yeah.
What else? So you
like this thing? I mean,
I would say I like it. I can play, I can play everything works. Which is great, Pokemon and I tried all of that stuff. But yeah, it's larger, but more screen real estate, though I still think the little tab there is kind of a hack, but I have more screen real estate. So that's nice. The screen quality is, I can't, it's not like, wow, it's so much way better, but it's pleasing to look at. And, now, one gripe, I did have one gripe. It'll come back to me.
Okay.
But
so I've gone. I'll let you cogitate on that. But I've gone from the iPhone 11 Pro, which was a 5.8 inch screen. Forgive me if I'm off by 0.1 inches on that. To the iPhone 12 Pro, which was a 6.1 inch screen. Almost the same form factor as the iPhone 11 Pro, a little bit bigger though. And the iPhone 11 Pro was an okay size for me. I was not okay. Like the iPhone 10R, that was a little too big for me. Just having in my pocket, having in my hand even. I mean, I've got big hands. I'm, piano player and all that stuff. I mean, I'm a drummer, but believe it or not, I'm also a piano player. Not nearly as good at piano as I am at the drums. Anyway, but it was too big for me. So going from the 10R down to the 11 Pro was a welcome return because I had the 10, which is the same size as the 11 Pro. But going to the 12 Pro was like, okay, like fine. More screen real estate is always good as long as the trade-off is good. And I could deal with it. I got used to it, but I needed to check out this mini. I needed to know because in days past, the iPhone SE, not the 2020 SE, but the original iPhone SE 4 years ago, was my favorite phone. I still have like fond, visceral memories of holding and using that phone. It was the phone I wound up taking as my daily driver when we went to Europe with the kids, whatever it was, 4.5 years ago, back when we could travel. Remember those days? And I loved it. And so when they announced the Mini, I was like, yeah, I got to try this. And I mean, I've only had it for 3 days. My family is eagerly awaiting, like, what's going to happen with the 12 Pro? Who gets it? At the moment, we don't have any answers for that question, but we will within the next week. And I think we all know which way it's going to go. This 12 Mini feels great in my hand. I love the size of it. I've been using it since Friday when it arrived. I have not had any moments where I'm like, oh, dang, I wish the screen was bigger. Like that 5.4 inch screen really is enough for me when I'm using a phone. I'm sure there will be moments where it's like, oh, I wish this was a little bigger, but by and large, I'm not finding those. It's hard to comment on battery life yet because I migrated like you did, John. My 12 Pro I set up from scratch because it was time and it was a good thing. I just migrated that to the 12 mini. So it's still going through the process of like crunching all my photos in the background that generally takes a couple of days and uses battery more than it would. So I'll have more comments on battery life later. But I love the size of this thing. My only hesitation is that if I had gone from the 10R to this, I would have absolutely zero hesitation. But I didn't. I went from the 10R to the 11 Pro with its cameras, to the 12 Pro with its cameras, to the 12 mini with less cameras. And not having a zoom camera, I really want a 12 Pro mini is what I want. And I'm hoping that there's a 13 Pro mini in our future options. But I as long as I can like wrestle myself to deal with the fact that the camera in this is not the camera I would truly want, and more specifically, not the camera I was truly used to, then I will stick with this 12 mini. I'm very, very, unless something else comes up, unless it turns out battery life is awful or whatever. So,
all right. And I want to show you something, Dave.
Okay.
Can you tell what color my phone is?
Why, I know it's blue.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, then you can see through the case that I got a little while ago because I went to one of these virtual shows. So the case was waiting for the phone.
Right.
But so just to let people know, this is the Presidio Perfect Clear for the iPhone 12 mini. I really like clear cases. And this one's clearer than the one that I had on my 8. And it's truly clear. Now, you and I had a debate about this a while ago, but this is truly clear. I mean, you were able to see the color here, and it wasn't like diffused or anything.
Right,
the other one was kind of diffused. So I'll just recommend this case. I mean, the case, other than being clear, which lets the beauty of the phone shine through, let's see. The feature that I like about this is that it has 13-foot drop protection.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
Because I did drop my 8 at one point and cracked the corner of the screen because I didn't have one of these cases. So I actually had to pay to get it replaced before I could trade it in. So.
All right. So it's interesting that you mentioned that, John, because I am also testing and enjoying a spec case on my phone. I have lots of cases to test, so we'll talk about these, any others in the future. But I have very similar case. It's the Presidio Perfect Clear with grips, which I really like. I used the phone for about a day without a case on it, and then decided if I don't put a case on it soon, I'm never going to want a case on this thing. So, so I put the Perfect Clear with grips on it, and I mean, I like having the grips. The grips are definitely the reason to have the case. So, yeah. So it's good stuff. Yeah, it's fun. So I'm glad that you like this, man. I was curious as to how the transition would go. Like I said, I've seen lots of other people go through this, and most people tend to do just fine with it. And I'm glad to hear that it's been positive for you. Carrier issues aside. Yeah. So
the only thing I'll mention, so just a heads up here, I'm not going to gripe too much, but so my old phone I got from Verizon, and we have a Verizon company store in town. The only thing is that my thought was I would be able to eSIM my Verizon, and then I could use a physical SIM for a second carrier because this phone has the capability. Verizon at this point was not able to migrate from my physical SIM to an eSIM on the 12, which made me unhappy, but he said he'd pass the request up the chain because in the opinion of the Verizon guy I talked to, everything's going to be eSIM someday. There will be no physical SIMs. Or you may have a phone that does 2 eSIMs. I don't know if Apple currently offers a phone that does that.
No, they have in the US it's one of each, physical and E. In Europe, it's 2 physical SIMs. So I think we're a ways off from the world of no SIMs. But I mean, when I say a ways off, I mean a few years. Yeah.
So currently, the only way or the easiest way, other than setting up a new line, which is moving the SIM from the old phone to the new phone. When I moved the SIM from the old phone to the new phone, I immediately got a text message from Verizon saying, hey, you better get a 5G SIM. It's like, I didn't even think that was a thing that that you need a new SIM to enable, but apparently you do, at least with Verizon. So went to my local Verizon store, they swapped out my SIM, and then I'm having a data related issue with them that I hope I can work out.
Probably related to my, when you get a new SIM, in theory, it should inherit all of the settings from your prior account. But that is not.
And that did not happen. So in a nutshell, that's what happened.
Yeah.
Is that the data that I had before did not transition over. And actually, I'm now in you have no data mode. And that's not right because I had plenty of data left.
You need to switch. You need to switch to
maybe.
Yeah, it's time.
And I didn't see, and I never saw the 5G light up, which is unusual because we have pretty good coverage, at least LTE coverage. So
yeah. I
want to see that 5G up there.
Yeah. It's fun when you see the 5G and it actually means 5G. So yeah, it's good. Cool. All right. We have all kinds of questions and tips. There is one cool stuff found that I want to share, John, because it is relevant to our current discussion. I am a huge fan of tempered glass screen protectors, so much so that I put one on my iPhone 12 mini before I even turned it on. I took it out of the box. It had a sticker on it. I peeled it off. I put the tempered glass screen protector on. I did the same with my iPhone 12 Pro. I normally pay about $10 for a 3-pack of screen protectors. They break, that's how it goes. Putting them on is a bit of a trick. If you don't trust yourself to line things up, line of sight with, your eyes and your hands, it can be frustrating. And so it might be worth paying a little bit more. Belkin Ultraglass, it's a $40 thing. So you're paying quite a bit more than you would for the cheap glass that you buy 3 packs of on Amazon. However, the Belkin Ultraglass application process is flawless because it has a tray that you put your phone into, and then you flip this. The glass is stuck to the tray and perfectly aligned with where your phone is about to be. So you pick the glass up, you put the phone in the tray, you peel the backer off the glass, and then you just flap it down, and it is in exactly the right spot. And then you take your phone out, and you're done. So that process, for some, may well be worth the small price premium that you would pay. So I wanted to throw that out. There are a lot of companies that make premium glass for the phones, and normally, we don't mention them here because it rarely is it worth the price delta to buy simply a brand name. This is more than a brand name. You are buying an applicator tray with the glass perfectly fit into it. So I was pretty stoked about that. So there you go.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because they have this ceramic technology in the screen. I've never felt a need for a screen protector. Although, like I said, I did drop my phone once, and if I had a screen protector, it wouldn't have cracked.
Right. Yep. So, yeah, there you go.
So you get like double protection. I always remember some of those screen protectors. The thing was always getting the air bubbles out.
So, have you done one of the tempered glass ones? Because the plastic ones were crap. I couldn't deal with those. But the tempered glass, bubbles aren't nearly as bad with these, and it's pretty easy to just like if there's one near the edge, you just lift up the edge and push it out. But the trick to putting one of these on is to put it on and push first in the middle of the screen and then start pushing to the edges. Because if you push around the edges, you'll seal the edges, and any air that happened to be there is in the middle. So push the middle, push out to the edges, and it tends to go pretty well. But with the tempered glass, you can lift it off. The only thing is you want to be careful how much airflow is happening around you, because dust particles you don't want to get in underneath. Right. So, yep. All right, folks. Well, like I said, we have lots of quick tips. We have, I always think about this show in terms of like a set list with the band. And usually we start out with some small little, short little pop songs. I think about it. And then we get into the jams. Today we started out with the jams, and then we had like a guest performer jam with us for a little bit. And and then we tried to go into the pop songs, and we got exactly one before we were back into jam mode, which is great. I love it. So sometimes you just roll with the flow. Speaking of the band, I figure we'll bring them in. It's time, John. It's time. It's time. Fun stuff.
Yeah.
So stoked. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I learned something new the other day, which I think was the case on my... I'd never seen this before. So I have some Samsung Qi chargers.
Yeah.
And when I put the phone on them, a blue LED lights up. Well, the other day I looked at one. I guess I never got to this point before. And it was green. I'm like, why is it green? It knows when the phone is charged to 100%. So it turns green.
Yeah, right.
Kind of suggests that you can remove your phone now.
You're good. That's handy. That's pretty good. I like that. So I
do have to, speaking of chargers, I have to get one of those oddly named MagSafe chargers or see what's out there.
I ordered one of those when I bought my 12 Pro, the MagSafe charger, and we're trying to end the show and we can't. The jams keep going. I like the MagSafe charger. It when you have a case on the phone, if it's a MagSafe case, honestly, I think MagSafe is going to be better for cases than it is going to be for chargers. But in terms of what general people will wind up using for it. But it does charge faster, and so there is that. You get a different logo on your screen when it's charging through a MagSafe charger than through a regular one.
Oh.
Yeah, because it knows, it's Apple devices. Really, it's just Qi with alignment like we talked about. So it's fine. Whatevs. It's all good. So I'm not gaga over MagSafe yet. Like I said, I haven't seen the killer app for it, so maybe I need to get some MagSafe cases. I'm really curious to see what third parties do with MagSafe cases. I think they're going to be a little more fringy and innovative than Apple. Apple with cases tends to pretty much play the straight and narrow, which is fine. Leave it to the third parties to do the niche stuff.
I think I saw something out there where they kind of remind you that if you have a leather case, you're probably going to get an indentation from the MagSafe.
Right.
Just so you know. I mean, it's leather, right?
It's leather, and you've got magnets squeezing.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, leather cases can be nice. I don't know.
It's like branding it, I guess.
You're branding. That's all. You're just branding it. What's the problem? I like it. I
wonder if you could put like a...
Keep going. No, it's fine. It's whatever.
No, I was thinking maybe create a branding, like a custom-made MagSafe with your brand.
Oh.
And you'll have it then indented on the back of your phone. Wow, I should patent that.
Dude, that's a good idea.
Somebody may be working on that already.
You never know. Yeah, here's a leather case. It comes pristine, and then you can choose your choice of like 4 different things, or talk with our marketing department and put your brand here, right? So we could have like a Mac Geek Gab logo embossed on the charger, and boom, you put that on your leather case, and now you are branded a Mac Geek Gab listener. I like this.
Nice.
This is good. Speaking of branded Mac Geek Gab listeners, I want to take a minute and thank all of the premium subscribers whose contributions have come in this week. Of course, Mac Geek Gab Premium is where you can go if you want to participate in this. It is not mandatory, but we certainly appreciate it, and it is a part of what allows us to do this show. So it is necessary, but not for everyone, because we understand that not everyone can participate in this particular way, and that's okay. So sending thanks out to Brian in Walton Hills, Daniel in San Diego, Abel in Santa Rosa, Peter in Auburn, Craig from New Lambton, Bob, Dr. Mac Levitis from Austin, from Working Smarter for Mac Users, Jim from Myrtle Beach, James from San Antonio, Abdullah from Reisterstown, Joshua from Silver Spring, Thomas from Gardner, Art from Pleasant Lake, Nick from Mount Clemens, Ari from Kensington, John from Laverne, Ron from Paramus, Mikhail from Altadena, or Michael, I'm not sure. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. From Altadena, Philip from Tucson, Tim from Des Moines, Bruce from Pascagoula, Rick from Plano, Bob from LaPeche, Timothy from West Windsor, Timothy from Hendersonville, and Rick from Traverse City. You all rock. Thank you very, very much for doing what you do. Again, you can learn about that at macgeekgab.com/premium. I want to say thanks to all of our sponsors, of course, including the three that we mentioned in the show: mintmobile.com/MGG, linode.com/MGG, and Nebia.com with coupon code MGG, because that's where it all happens. That's where the magic happens. Go check that out. I can't wait to go take another shower. The thing's freaking amazing. All right. I think that's it, John. Thanks to all of you for listening. Thanks for sending in your questions and your tips. Thanks for participating in the chat room at live.macgeekgab.com. It's what makes it all happen. We all make it happen together. Really, it's truly. I mean, you know that. The show doesn't happen without you, so thank you. Have fun this week. Be good. Don't do anything we wouldn't do. It's a short list. And, well, don't get caught.
Made on a Mac.
And we're out. Cool. Fun.